Hello, welcome. My name is Paul Donnelly, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Chau Chak Wing Museum here at the University of Sydney. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that the University of Sydney is built. As we hear tonight of the importance of the olive to life and economy, so may we reflect upon alternative knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Welcome everyone to the Chau Chak Wing Museum. I'd like to acknowledge our friends and colleagues from the Greek Festival of Sydney, with whom we co-host, and personally extend a special welcome to our guests from the wider Greek Australian community. I would especially like to welcome tonight the Honourable Yannis Malakourtis, the Consul General of Greece in Sydney, a regular guest here, lovely to see you again. Ms. Chrysa Prokopaki, the Trade Commissioner of Greece and Australia, Mr. Anathasios Lambrou, First Councillor of Public Diplomacy of Greece in Australia at the Consulate General of Greece in Sydney, Ms. Anastasia Christopholopoulou, First Secretary for the Public Diplomacy of Greece and Australia at the Consulate General of Greece in Sydney, Mr. Con Apoiofis, Vice President of the Greek Orthodox Community of New South Wales, and Ms. Nia Karteris, Chair of the Greek Festival of Sydney and Vice President of the Greek Orthodox Community of New South Wales. Welcome. Kalos ήρθατε. To outline tonight's events, we will start with Dr. Tamara Lewit's lecture on the archaeology of the olive in the Mediterranean, followed by a performance of a short written piece by young Greek-Australian writer Emily Papagiannopoulos. Emily's performance will be followed by a short presentation by the Trade Commissioner of Greece to Australia, Ms. Chrysa Prokopaki. To finish, we will welcome you to taste olive products from producers Archetypon, Olive Groves, Onar Wellness, and Limperis Estate Iskra, and Ophelia. We need to stress there is no commercial arrangement between these firms and the Trade Commission of Greece, but we are pleased to be able to celebrate their produce tonight, along with some local additions. So in beginning, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Tamara Lewit, whose paper, Liquid Gold, Olive Oil in the Ancient World, will explore the history and archaeology of the olive in ancient Greece. Dr. Lewit is an archaeologist at the University of Melbourne, with research focusing on the archaeological evidence of economic history in the Roman Empire, late antiquity, and the early Middle Ages. Her areas of interest are farming, animals in human society, technological innovation, wine and oil production, and also the roles of children in farming and trade in agricultural products. So welcome, Tamara.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. There's some. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, according to Greek legend, the origins of the olive tree lay in a competition between the god Poseidon and the goddess Athena for possession of the city of Athens. The story of their rivalry to become Athens' patron god is recorded in a 1st century source who describes it like this. Poseidon was the first to come to Attica, and with a blow of his trident in the middle of the Acropolis, he produced a salt spring. After him came Athena, you see on the slide, and she planted an olive tree. Zeus appointed as arbiters the 12 gods, and in accordance with their verdict, the country was given to Athena, the first to plant the olive. Well, perhaps things didn't happen quite like that. Legend aside, how did the planting of olive orchards and the making of olive oil really begin? This question is important because the cultivation of olives is of special significance to the history of human societies. Olive oil is highly nutritious, so it has been an important component of human foodways across a large geographic area. Olive oil also has many other uses, as we'll see, including most importantly as fuel. Olive trees can grow in harsh environments such as mountainous conditions, which are unsuitable for other crops, and also regenerate after fire and drought. Olive oil is long-lasting and can be stored and transported. So making oil has been important to the ways that societies have functioned, including storing oil for food security or for status, and transporting and exchanging it through trade, tribute, and tax. Finally, the olive tree takes several years to mature and bear fruit. So growing olive trees reflects a society's stability and the possibility of long-term planning. In looking at the origins of olive growing and oil making, one question has interested archaeologists. Which came first, the olive or the oil? In other words, did humans first produce oil from olives or prepare them through pickling for consuming the whole olive? Of course, you have some delicious looking examples of both there on the table that is waiting for your tasting. So our very oldest archaeological evidence for olive oil making is a submerged site of Kfar Samir, which is about 5 meters under the sea off the coast of Israel. This village was inhabited around 5,600 to 5,000 BC, in other words, 7,000 to 7,500 years ago, before sea levels changed with climate change at the end of the Ice Age. Archaeologists from the University of Haifa and Flinders University in Adelaide have found there crushing basins and a pit filled with crushed olive waste, as well as a straining basket, which you see on the left there, compared to a more modern one on the right, exactly the same kind of design. So this indicates that people in this village 7,500 years ago were making olive oil. They were crushing olives and they were straining the oil. Our earliest evidence for pickling table olives is from a nearby site, Hishule Carmel, where whole olive pits have been found in stone basins, which seem to have been used for pickling these olives. This village site is dated to around 4,700 to 4,500 BC. In other words, about 500 years later than the site of the village with the oil making. And in answer to our question, it looks like oil came first and was probably first made in this region, the region of modern Israel, around 7,500 years ago. But the olive oil and the olives from these two very ancient sites were probably made from wild olives rather than cultivated ones. You can see examples of modern cultivated olive pips on the top row, and the ones from the archaeological sites further down. You can see that they're quite different in their shape and much more irregular. So it looks like the people from these villages were picking the wild olives from shrubs which were growing naturally in their native habitat, which is that region. Another question which archaeologists have tried to answer is when did people then start cultivating olive trees deliberately or domesticate the olive to gather the crop rather than simply picking these wild olives? And the knowledge of this comes from increase in olive pollen in relation to other wild plants and the presence of olive pollen and wood outside the natural range of the wild olive. And our earliest evidence for this is at a site called Tel Tzaf, about 5000 BC. This map shows you the possible dates for the beginning of olive cultivation, deliberate growing of olives in orchards across the Mediterranean. So we can tell from this archaeological evidence, from pollen, that the cultivation of olives gradually spread from its point of origin in the Middle East north and west over a period of several thousand years. The earliest pollen evidence for the cultivation of olives in Crete is around 4000 to 3500 BC, and on mainland Greece, about 2300 BC. And it's unknown whether this was an independent domestication or whether people in these places borrowed the idea from people from the Middle East. We don't know that. But sorry, definitely not first in Athens. We can also use other sorts of evidence for the spread of oil making, such as pottery. And this particular storage pot, which is about 1 metre high, was found broken into 400 pieces at a site in Sicily. And recent chemical analysis has been carried out, which showed that it has traces of acids from olive oil inside it, demonstrating that olive oil had reached Sicily about 700 years earlier than we had previously thought, around 2000 BC. We can also look at texts about oil. So, for example, there are many writing tablets from the Minoan palaces of Crete in the Bronze Age around 13 to 1200 BC, which mention olive oil. In fact, one of the oldest still producing olive trees in the world grows in Crete, and it is dated to at least this period, possibly even earlier. It could be up to 4000 years old. It has been, the date has been estimated by scholars from the University of Crete. A few hundred years later, after this time, in Homer's Odyssey, olive oil is mentioned as part of the treasure in the palace of King Odysseus at Ithaca. Telemachus went down into the lofty and spacious storeroom where his father's treasure of gold and bronze lay heaped up on the floor. Here too, there was a store of fragrant olive oil. Olive cultivation and the practice of making olive oil spread further to the Western Mediterranean, to places like mainland Italy, Spain, France, and Northern Africa, brought there by the Greeks and the Phoenicians, who settled in colonies in these places around the 9th to 6th centuries BC. And later by the Roman conquests throughout huge areas of Europe and the north coast of Africa. And between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, olive oil became a major part of the foodways, the farming, the economy, trade, and life throughout the Roman Empire. Some Roman orchards still survive today, such as these ones in the Negev desert, and they had extensive irrigation systems. It was desert in ancient times, a very similar climate, and with recent growing aridity in the current climate, the archaeologists from the University of Haifa have actually been restoring the ancient irrigation channels to try to preserve these olive trees. They've also taken cuttings of a cultivar previously unknown from these ancient trees, which is being grown in a rescue garden at Israel's National Institute for Agricultural Research and Development. So an important part of the modern legacy of the ancient Greeks and Romans is that today olives are grown around the world and olive oil is widely produced and consumed, as I'm sure you'll hear more of tonight. So how did people make olive oil? Well, olive oil requires specific processes to produce, and these began, as we have seen, at least 7,500 years ago, and some of the same fundamental methods have been used right up until today. We can see almost identical processes and equipment in archaeology as have been used in the Mediterranean, really certainly into the 20th century, and in some cases into the 21st century. So you can see here the practice of harvesting olives in late autumn or early winter, with the olives being shaken or brushed off the tree using rods or forks, carried out in 6th century Attica, in 21st century Delphi, and I'm having a go here in Sicily last year, which was a tremendous fun. I wasn't very productive, but I had a lot of fun. The olives high up in the tree are harvested by someone climbing the tree. Usually this was a job allocated to men, while children, women and older people stretched out the cloths or nets below the trees to catch the olives as they fell, according to an old Provençal proverb. To gather olives, you need a madman above and a wise woman below. The olives which fall are often gathered from the ground by young people or children. And you can see in these pictures, the figures gathering the olives are shown as smaller, more youthful, without beards and so on. Typical even in more modern times. The next step to processing is to crush or mill the olives. Ancient mills usually had huge rotating stones turned by humans with a stick, and exactly the same types of mills have been used up until even today, mostly until around the 1950s, but even occasionally today. The finest oil, sorry, I'll just go back. The finest oil is made just from what was made from what ran out of the crushed olives just from this first step or process. And the Romans called this flour of oil, ole floris. After crushing or milling, then various processes can be used to extract more oil. So a very simple process, you can simply put the olives into a sack and twist the sack. These Egyptian pictures are probably of winemaking, but in more recent times, exactly the same process has been used for oil making. And you can also tread on the sack or a plastic bag or some sort of bag. Sorry about the quality of the photos. I took these in the Ethnographic Museum in Split in Croatia, where they were hanging. So they were the best I could get on my phone. A more complex way to extract more olive oil is to place the crushed olives into kind of bags or baskets known as frails, usually made from something like hemp or reed, and to pile these up in a machine, which will then exert force on the baskets. And from the Bronze Age onwards, this was done by weighting very long wooden beams, around 5 to 10 meters long, weighting them with heavy stones and placing the stack of frails. You can see them just through that kind of crack in the wall there. And they could be quite enormous, like these Roman examples in Tunisia, of which the only part that remains are the stone supports for the long wooden beam. And these are enormous. They're about 3 meters tall. They weigh as much as the car that you can see in the background there of the photo. And in the 19th century, the German geographer Heinrich Barth, who visited Tunisia, thought that they were part of temples. He thought they were kind of sacred entrances to temples. And he said it may have had the purpose of serving as a penitential passage, preparing the worshippers previous to their offering sacrifices by obliging them to squeeze themselves through this narrow passage. I'm sorry, they're just supports. You might know the joke about archaeologists, you know, if we don't know what something is, we just call it a ritual object. Some used a mechanism which employed a hand-carved wooden screw. And these don't survive archaeologically because they're very, wood doesn't preserve very well in the archaeological record. So we just have one sole example, which is that one from Herculaneum, preserved by the special conditions of the eruption of the volcano Vesuvius. But we have more modern examples from the 19th and 20th centuries, which use exactly the same principles, which were in fact described as described by the 1st century AD Roman writer Pliny, who wrote about this kind of press. Ancient forms of presses all continued to be used well into the 20th century, and it was only with the development of iron-built presses, like the one that you see on the left in France, and new power sources such as hydraulic power in the 19th and 20th centuries, that led to the obsolescence of these types of presses which had existed for thousands of years. But even in the 1950s, the ethnographer Gulick described a Lebanese village in which a traditional press with 3 stone weights, exactly like this one, was still being used, even though in the village they had much more efficient machine-driven presses because, he writes in his book, the new presses were apparently less fun to operate. Finally, the oil must be separated from the vegetable water or a brownish lees, and this works on the principle that the oil is lighter and floats to the top, so it can just be scooped off with something like a spoon, or as Robert is doing there, an old saucepan, as described by the 2nd century BC Roman writer Cato, or through more sophisticated decantation jars or tanks, which have holes or pipes lower down to drain off the lees from below, as in these examples. And the lees or the vegetable water is quite useful as a byproduct. So the Romans, for example, used it as an insecticide for both animals and plants, and also for buildings, things like grain storage buildings. They used it for waterproofing, as a plant fertilizer, and as grease for machinery and leather. And the crushed pips can be used as a very valuable fuel. Olive oil was absolutely fundamental to the ancient diet, at least from the classical period, that is around the middle of the 1st millennium BC, 500 BC-ish. Oil was a major product of many regions in the Roman Empire and traded very widely. It was carried in amphorae from places like the Middle East to Britain and the army on the northwestern frontiers. And we have some finds of actual Roman olive oil preserved in the cities destroyed by Vesuvius, Pompeii and Herculaneum. Recent isotopic analysis of the bones of working people found in the ruins of Herculaneum found that they had consumed very high quantities of olive oil, consistent with estimates of around 20 litres per person per year, or about 55 millilitres per day, which would be about 450 calories, good food. I recently visited Sicily, as you saw on the slide, and the woman at the oil farm there told me that she uses 80 litres of olive oil a year for her family of 3, which would come out to almost exactly the same quantities. Oil could be made into a very nutritious food for the poor by just adding some garden produce, garlic, parsley, rue and coriander, ground up in a mortar and pestle with goat's or sheep's milk cheese. It was used universally in cooking, even for desserts, A Roman recipe attributed to the writer Apicius for a sweet dish says, take pieces of bread, soak them in beaten eggs and goat's milk, fry them in oil and serve them with honey. Sounds rather like something you might find in a trendy cafe. Olive oil was the fundamental source of lighting throughout the ancient world for millennia. Candles did exist, but the main form of lighting was a wick in olive oil in some sort of clay or bronze lamp like this one from the Chau Chak Wing Museum. A typical small lamp like this holds around 100 millilitres and could burn for over 7 hours. And it gives quite good light because olive oil doesn't smoke. And this is my sister trying this at home. She's using one of my museum replica lamps. I have a few, so I sacrificed one of them to try. She poured olive oil into it and set it alight. As you can see, made quite a nice little light and a reconstruction on the left. The lamps could also be made of stone, as in these examples from Bronze Age Crete, or bronze. And the Romans liked to make all sorts of fanciful shapes, particularly in the shape of feet with shoes or sandals for burning olive oil. In the ancient world, olive oil was not just for eating or even for eating and burning. It was also used for cleaning your body instead of soap. In the Odyssey, when Odysseus' boat is shipwrecked on an island in the Ionian Sea, he is brought a golden container of olive oil by Princess Nausicaa and says, "Young women, please stand a little to one side, that I may wash the brine from my shoulders and anoint myself with oil, for it is long enough since my skin has had a drop of olive oil on it." Greek athletes rubbed their bodies with oil both before and after exercise, and you would take a bottle to the gym with you, not a bottle of water, but a bottle of olive oil, such as this one. And it was often imported from the Near East into the Greek mainland via Corinth, which was a great trading centre. And you can see from this beautiful example from the museum here that it actually has Near Eastern motifs, such as a panther or a sphinx on it, which were travelled to Greece along with the oil. These would be worn hanging by a string from your wrist. And men in classical Greece at the gymnasium, it was men only, would rub it on their bodies and then use a metal scraper called a strigil, which we call a strigil, to scrape off the oil and the sweat after exercise, instead of having a shower and soaping yourself. Apparently olive oil does have some antibacterial properties. According to the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, there are two liquids that are especially agreeable to the human body: wine inside and oil outside. But oil is an absolute necessity. Oil was essential to the bathing routine of the Roman world. So the Romans were the ones that went crazy for the baths. Men, women, and children, rich, poor, and slaves all went regularly to public baths, taking with them their bath set containing a bottle of oil, often bronze, the Romans being very practical. You can't break a bronze bottle. That makes a lot of sense. And their strigils ready to scrape themselves. Now, a couple of years ago, I was involved in researching two historical, I'll just mention before I say that at the baths, Roman baths, both men and women were involved in gymnastic exercises, things like weights, the little hand weights that they're holding there on the left, ball games, and running as well, and scrape their bodies off with strigils. Yes, I was involved a couple of years ago in researching a couple of children's novels, which were written by my sister, author Anna Sidor. And this was a wonderful experience because as a children's author, she asked me some very unexpected questions about things that as an archaeologist and historian, I had never thought of. And one of the questions was, what did they do with the skin scrapings? And I said, I will have to look that up. And what I found was a medical writer, a man called Aetius, who describes collecting it from the bathhouse or the hot water to make a paste to use in his medicines. So clearly people just chucked it on the floor or in the water, and yes, it could end up in your tablets. I have taken the liberty of just putting out a few little cards, which if you look on the back, it gives you Anna Sidor's website. And the reason that I've done that, if you're interested, please help yourself later on while you're helping yourself to olive oil. If you're interested, I have written a website at that as a section of Anna's website. The address is on the cards, and it's for mainly children, but also general interest. And it does have a section on olive oil. So you can look that up if you're interested. The richest people who would come to Roman baths, followed by a retinue of up to 50 slaves, carrying with them their beautiful silver caskets of olive oil, which would be put in little bottles in those holes. And you can see on the side of that circular casket, the grand lady sitting on a chair, reaching for one of these bottles. Here you have her going to the baths with her accompanying slaves, carrying all the bathing equipment. And Clement of Alexandria describes these women and how their slaves carried around high-backed chairs decorated with gold and silver and innumerable vessels of gold and silver and charcoal grills so they could eat and drink while bathing. Oil was also an important component of medicine. One book of Roman medicine says that it was included in hair dyes. Those who are embarrassed to be old, if they want to dye their grey hair, as if they could strip years away from their true age, add earthworm's ash to oil, with which they may anoint the head. Other recipes for medical cures include chicken or pigeon dung mixed with olive oil as a cure for ulcerations. Olive oil was also used in magical prescriptions for illness and other magic, including curses, including to write magical names using olive oil as a kind of invisible ink. A recent find at this cave was of 120 4th century AD pottery oil lamps hidden in crevices in the cave, along with 3 human skulls and bronze weapons from around 2000 BC, so 2,500 years earlier. In the classical Greek and Roman periods, dark caves were seen as entrances to the underworld and were used for rituals and magic. People gazed into oil lamps like these to see deities and demons whom they questioned about the future and to communicate with the dead. Human skulls were used and metal weapons were used to repel ghosts. So that's probably what they were doing there. Another way to wear oil was as perfume. Ancient perfumes were made from olive oil, steeped with fragrant substances such as rose, irises, quince, saffron, marjoram, coriander, or wild thyme. Bronze Age texts from Mycenae and Pylos already mention perfume production and the spices to make them. For example, this one, of which there is a plaster reproduction in our museum, which lists coriander, coriadnon, enough of it to make quite a lot of perfume. And these tablets from the Mycenaean palace of Pylos also name 4 perfumers: Kokkalos, Eumedes, Philaios, and Thyestes. And there was a perfume workshop inside the palace. And the tablets record stores of about 3,000 litres of scented oil, and that it was controlled and distributed within the palace. So when you entered this palace, you would not only be faced with these enormous, magnificent painted rooms, but the whole place would smell different from outside. By the Roman period, perfume was widely made and used by the wealthy classes, both men and women. The Roman writer Pliny wrote, "The perfume most highly praised in the old days was made on the island of Delos. The iris perfume of Corinth was extremely popular. Oil of saffron from Rhodes was praised most highly, scent of marjoram made in Kos, and cypress scent made in Cyprus. Athens has maintained credit of her all-Athenian perfume," but he doesn't tell us what it was made from. Little blown glass bottles were used in the Roman period for such perfume. If you're down in Melbourne at any time, I've curated an exhibition called Ancient Lives, along with my colleague, Dr. Caroline Tully, and you can see such objects at the University of Melbourne at the exhibition. The most expensive Roman perfumes contained frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, or cassia brought from as far away as Arabia or India. And in fact, recently in Spain, someone was digging up their backyard for renovations and found a Roman tomb, a Roman mausoleum with several intact burials, among which was this rock crystal perfume bottle still containing traces of perfume made from patchouli, which must have come from India. Those of us who remember the 60s, well, remember patchouli perfume. Olive oil, especially the highest quality oil, was used in ritual for thousands of years. In the book of Exodus, God tells Moses, "Take the finest spices, liquid myrrh, sweet-smelling cinnamon, cassia, and olive oil, and make of these a sacred anointing oil blended as by the perfumer. With it you shall anoint the tent of meeting and the ark of the covenant and the altar, so that it may be most holy. You shall anoint Aaron and his sons and consecrate them in order that they may serve me as priests." And oil was later used to anoint kings such as Samuel, David, and Solomon. In 2023, the oil for the coronation of King Charles III was made from olives on the Mount of Olives, pressed just outside Bethlehem and perfumed with sesame, rose, jasmine, cinnamon, and orange blossom. The act of anointing was modelled on the biblical description of anointing Solomon, and it was screened from the TV coverage as the most sacred moment in the ritual. The Hebrew word Messiah means anointed one, as does its Greek translation as Christos, excuse my pronunciation, originally indicating that the prophesied Saviour would be a descendant of the anointed King David. The first 2 letters forming a monogram became one of the earliest symbols of Christianity. In Bronze Age to classical Greece, scented oil was offered to the gods, used to anoint clothes for religious festivals, and used to anoint sacrificial animals. Since Athena was regarded as the creator of the olive tree, at the temple to Athena on the Athenian Acropolis, the statue of the goddess was made from olive wood and a sacred olive tree was planted. An olive tree still stands on the site, replanted from a branch of an ancient tree partly destroyed in World War II, but rescued by staff of the American School of Archaeology and replanted in 1952 by Princess Sophia of Greece. Oil was used in ancient Greek funerary rituals. The body was anointed with oil, and oil bottles like these ones from the Chau Chak Wing Museum were ritually buried with the remains of the dead. The description of the funeral of Patroclus in the Iliad reads, "They washed the body and anointed it softly with olive oil." And the example on the right actually shows a male and female figure on either side of a grave monument, presumably offering oil. This continued in the Roman period when we know that oils with frankincense and myrrh and pine resin were poured over either bodies or over the ashes in cremation rituals. Olive oil continued to be an important part of lighting, ritual, and trade within the Christian Mediterranean world of the 4th to 7th centuries AD. The olive branch became an early symbol of Christianity long before the cross was used. In the 3rd to 4th century catacombs, we frequently see images of Noah, the dove, and an olive branch using an image of salvation from the Hebrew scriptures. A chrism made of scented olive oil was used in Christian rituals, as it still is today. Churches had precious oil-filled lamps, and church lighting became extremely important. Early pagan temples were dimly lit, only entered by the priests and priestesses, but churches were for everyone and brightly lit even at night. This church, Hagia Sophia, was described in these words. No words are sufficient to describe the illumination in the evening. You might say that some nocturnal sun filled the majestic church with light. Early monasteries grew olives and produced olive oil, which was sold with special inscriptions on the packaging to tell you that this was sacred sweet oil, which was made by Christian monasteries. And it could even be made in the annexes of churches themselves, as in these examples from Samos and Cyprus. This wreck of a ship, which was probably traveling from Samos to Constantinople with deliveries of sweet olive oil, had a weight inscribed, "Belonging to George, priest, sea captain." Now, in the 21st century, we are still using olive oil for most of the same uses as we have over the past 7,500 years. For cleansing, for cosmetics, for lighting, for rituals, and of course, for food. And you might notice that this bottle of Cretan oil has a dove and an olive branch on it, harking back still to the Hebrew scriptures from nearly 3,000 years ago. So I think we can say that the 12 gods made a good choice when they selected the creator of the olive tree as the winner of the competition for Athens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for that amazing that journey through space and time, back 7,000 years across the whole of the Mediterranean. I think you can see there's very clearly a great history to what we will be trying at the end of the evening. I'm sure it'll taste all the more intense and we'll appreciate it all the more thanks to Tamara's wonderful lecture. Thank you, Tamara. Unfortunately, Tamara has to catch a plane, so she's had to rush off, and she didn't even grab a bottle of olive oil, which I think shows a great deal of restraint on her part. But she's back off to Melbourne. So I would like, for our next performance, I'd like to invite Emily Papianopoulos to perform her written work. Thank you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you for asking me to speak today. I wrote this story about a year ago for an assignment for university, and I was asked to write about a place. When I think of place, I thought about my grandparents' home, my dad's parents' home, and the life that they've brought to this home, which is wholly inspired by this story. And my yaya is also here, present tonight with us. So thank you. What are you thinking about? Nothing. There was an excuse for everything under this roof. For all the times the sun or the moon are personified, a house defeats each tenfold, even earning an alternate word, a home. Theirs has 2 bolt locks on the front door. More symbolic than anything, the mosaic glass would be far easier to break if someone tried. You learn quick to differentiate between a firecracker and a gunshot. She'd ask you to keep the light open upstairs, so it always appeared as if someone was home. 2 seats at the front, 2 chairs on the front porch, countless others inside, unassigned assigned seats for all visitors who came past. The warmth and the sweet scent of Livani cascades from the kitchen, under the door, and into the not-so-serene scene of suburban Greenacre. First steps, first words in Greek, of course, first loves and last loves, all absorbed like the olive oil we consume too much of into the floors, walls, and ceilings of their home. We adapted to the expression, what happens at Iya's house stays at Iya's house. An aroma of care cultivated through generations of nothing but dirt and the odd scorpion. Our uncontrollable laughter witnessed by the hotta, pulled from the garden, washed and salted and lathered with more olive oil. The endless bowls of volemono that witnessed our laughter, so hot it burnt your tongue every time. The embers of conflict quenched under all the love and kisses and hugs and prayers of forgiveness. When I was younger, my grandmother taught me a prayer. Do you know when you repeat something so many times that you worry the words will lose their meaning? Or after years of repetition, it morphs into a entirely changed fusion of letters and sounds, and you're saying it wrong the whole time? Not even recalling if you wore that outfit to your cousin's christening, because you were full, but the light blue hue of your best dress feels so crisp in thought, or was it the photo your mum took of you in it? How many times have the photo albums, so meticulously prepared, been rifled through by children and teenagers greedy to remember their former selves, poreless and unscathed? Some things remain constant. This one actually goes as the following. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Guard and guide me through the night and awake me with the morning's light. As if someone had scribbled this prayer over the bedroom walls in permanent ink, not black, but white and light and filled with the conversations that we had. Yet talk of death was so candid and unafraid that it no longer became the finish line, but rather a boulder in the path. Path to get to where? We'll find out soon enough. He sits on the right and I on the left, eating the creations of the morning, with copious amounts of flowers still scattered across the kitchen floor, patiently waiting to be swept up. Another chaotic attempt at making kuluria. In a silence so warm and familiar that your mind quietens, wondering thoughts and worries evicting themselves from the ridges of your brain, all until he makes a joke about a cloud looking like a whale or a submarine. Bubbling laughter spilling out like the cup she poured brandy in for you to try for the first time. I was 8. Don't question it. Ena aloha. No, I see that. That one kind of looks like a rabbit. I used to hunt rabbits back at the farm. And so it continues on. Isn't it peculiar for those in a place to obtain it, the impact of 4 walls and a roof? No longer defining itself as a shelter from the elements, but rather a shelter from the reality of life. Slowly, you notice the unspoken rules. One where you take everything with a grain of salt, followed by a who even uses only a grain of salt? Best is to just listen. Open the lights, close the lights. Why is that door open? Close that door. No one will ever utter the word superstition, but it lurks under the mutterings of the Matyasusdekatesara. Childhood memories slowly fading, except for the odd recollection of that one pair of shoes she was gifted when she first came to Australia, on her birthday of all days. Or when he'd mentioned that he'd been a chef in the army, when he couldn't remember the last time he and his brothers and cousins had had a full meal with seconds. It would always be acknowledged that after never having enough, that stain remains. But they know how to remove anything with a good amount of bleach, turning it pristine again. To make do with what you have and to be grateful for every seed, every drop of water, and for every embrace. The thing is, true gratitude comes from going without, but you don't want to hear that from me. One day someone, maybe you or I, will discover how to bottle the smell of the atmosphere. I'd capture the aroma of their garden. You'd ask, why'd you put the auguria there? That's where the seeds fell out of my hand. Fragments of guidance and wisdom sprinkled about like the budding seeds from a man who sits on his tree stump, rubbing fresh basil in between his aged palms. His words transforming and taking hold within us are like to the winding branches of an olive tree. Or the woman who has no concept of following a recipe because hers lies in the memories of having too little for 5 mouths to feed. Her cries to Pania, the only thing to drown out her hunger. He hands to me. Here, smell this. Vasiliko. He smiles and puts it in the front pocket of his flannel shirt. See, this is how I smell so nice. I've come to the realization that a place is a person, or rather many people. The walls, floors, and ceilings of their home no longer retain their physicality. Rather, they stand witness to the countless arguments held over the Dovely board. They see how she just sit and smile and watch, grateful for the presence of her grandchildren, screaming aside. Or his silence, the scent of fresh basil permanently etched into his checkered flannel shirts. Their love fluid and plentiful and as unyielding as the olive oil they use in every single meal. As their legacy, I am one of their stories. So, ask it to me again. What are you thinking about? Their front door has 2 locks on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was easy to see why that was an award-winning story. And I can't help thinking that they'll be those beautifully crafted words will always be a treasure for you in your memories. So well done. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce our next performance, Ms. Chrysa Prokopaki, the Trade Commissioner of Greece in Australia. Since her arrival in Australia in early 2023, Ms. Prokopaki has been busy working with the Greek Australian community to promote trade and commercial activities between our 2 nations. It's a pleasure to have her here at the Chau Chak Wing Museum tonight. Ms. Prokopaki will be speaking on the olive in the modern Greek economy. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my own pleasure being here with you. And after this emotional moment with Emily, I have to offset your mood with something more technical, but I'll try to keep it brief. Backward. So it was said that the Mediterranean ends where the olive tree no longer grows. However, the cultivation of olive oil trees is no longer limited to the areas of its origins. It is farmed in places as far removed as Southern Africa, Japan, China, and Australia. You know that there is big groves of olive oil here in Australia as well. So olive oil's economic impact goes beyond borders. Cultivation generates jobs for farmers, industry workers, exporters, and distributors. It also fosters tourism and cultural exchange, particularly in regions where olive groves have been a way of life for centuries. As already fully covered by Professor Lewit, discoveries made at archaeological sites such as Knossos, Mykonos, and Pylos all emphasize the key role that olives and olive oil played in the life and customs of ancient Greece. Viewed as a symbol of wisdom, peace, health, strength, and beauty, it was closely affiliated with the diet, economy, religious customs, and sports of ancient Greece. As already mentioned, the athletes used to coat themselves in olive oil before the Olympics. During this presentation, we will delve into the economic aspects of the Greek olive oil's global influence across centuries and its impact in the Greek society. So olive oil has always been a driving force in the economies and civilizations around the Mediterranean Sea. It fostered cultural exchange. It led to the development of new technologies. But most importantly, it brought people together, creating a network of trade and interaction that shaped the Mediterranean world. Evidence suggests that cultivation began around 5000 BC, with the Minoans on Crete being some of the earliest large-scale producers. Their sophisticated ships, laden with amphorae filled with olive oil, crisscrossed the Mediterranean Sea, spreading its use and wealth. The ancient Greeks, as the inheritors of the Minoans, embraced the olive oil use, and they also became major exporters, their olive oil trade routes reaching far and wide. The Phoenicians, afterwards, in purple color, not only incorporated it into their own culture, but also played a key role in spreading olive cultivation westward, bringing it to North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. Spain, a future olive oil powerhouse, has the Phoenicians to thank. Finally, the Romans understood the power of the olive oil, not just as a product, but as a symbol of their vast empire. Nowadays, the olive oil market is a multi-billion-dollar industry valued at over $14 billion in 2023. Countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, like Spain, Italy, and Greece, are the traditional powerhouses, with Spain being the undisputed champion in production of olive oil, and Greece being the undisputed champion in consumption of olive oil. So Greece has the highest annual per capita consumption in the world, 16 kilograms per year for every Greek. Greece's long history with olive oil cultivation is evident in its vast olive groves that blanket the countryside. The ideal Mediterranean climate with warm and dry summers and the mild winters provide the perfect environment for olive trees to flourish. In small-scale Greek agricultural societies like those of Crete, Kalamata, and Mytilene, groves are not just economic drives, but also a cultural touchstone, with many groves being family-owned and cared with the use of traditional methods like we saw in the previous presentation. The olive oil continues to play a vital role in the century's agriculture and trade. Having an annual output of 300,000 tons every year, Greece is the third largest producer of olive oil in the world, coming after Spain and Italy. Out of exports of olive oil, the country's annual income exceeds €1 billion. Imagine that the GDP of Greece is about €200 billion, and one out of this is only from olive oil income. The country is also the largest table olives producer in the world. Table olives producer. Fortunately, the Greek olive oil and table olives find their way to tables around the world. Since 1/3 of the annual production is exported. Both are mainly exported to the European Union, accounting for 90% of the exports. Interestingly, even fellow olive oil producing countries like Spain and Italy find themselves on this list, highlighting the unique qualities that distinguish the Greek olive oil. Greek exports are rising also to other countries such as Canada, Japan, the United States, and Australia. Regarding Australia, the olive oil exports from Greece to Australia have almost doubled in value over the past 4 years, accounting about 6.5 million euro every year. Our main competitors in Australia remain our European neighbors, Spain and Italy. So when it comes to quality, Greece rules supreme when it comes to that. Indeed, as much as 70% of all production is graded as extra virgin olive oil. This five-star olive oil is extracted through a diligent cold pressing process, preserving its exceptional flavor and health benefits. Greek extra virgin olive oil stands out for its unique taste, ranging from fruity and peppery to grassy notes. The dedication to quality is further emphasized by 17 Greek regions receiving certifications for being protected designations of origin areas in Greece, a mark of authenticity and regional distinction for their olive oil. This is the case with the Greek exporting companies that kindly send us tonight their high-quality extra virgin olive oil and cosmetic products to share with you. These companies are Archetypon olive oil from Kalamata, Askra Liberis Estate from Attica, Ophelia from Macedonia, and Honor Wellness Products based on olive oil from Athens. Please feel free to try all of this and take photos of this, because each one of them represents a different region of the country. Okay. While Greece had the head start, Australia is quickly making a name for itself as well. Australia's olive oil industry is flourishing with a focus on experimentation and unique olive varieties. It offers a unique taste profile, attracting a new generation of consumers who seek fresh and innovative flavors. The country exported 2,000 tons of olive oil in the crop year of 2023. Nevertheless, that was the second consecutive decrease from the country's record high of 4,000 tons in 2021. This exports decrease is not the case just for Australia, but for all the Mediterranean countries as well. Rising global temperatures have a complex impact on olive cultivation. From one perspective, milder winters can lead to earlier olive flowering and fruit ripening, which could potentially increase the yields. However, extensively hot summers can be detrimental. Heat stress can cause olive trees to shut down flower production, significantly reducing olive yields. Furthermore, extreme heat can affect the chemical composition of olives, leading to lower quality of olive oil. In fact, the heat waves associated with climate change in the recent years, have affected both the Mediterranean region and Australia as well. And they have significantly impacted olive oil production. When the supply of a product is lower, we always have higher prices. And this is the case in Greece, really impactful. Last September, the Hellenic Statistical Authority reported that olive oil prices in supermarkets, in the Greek supermarkets, were on average 29% higher than the same month the year before. Extra virgin olive oil now retails at an average of €15 per kilogram. This is equivalent to 24.5 Australian dollars per kilogram. No. And this is the field where the balancing act comes in. Both Greece and Australia encounter various challenges and obstacles. Greece needs to navigate competition while maintaining its premium image. Greece has also to deal with high transportation costs that can make their product less affordable in some markets. Australia, on the other hand, is grappling with meeting its own domestic demand and with carving out a unique space in the international market. In fact, both countries strive for excellence in olive oil production, and by fostering these connections, they can propel the global olive oil industry forward. Since Greece and Australia don't directly compete in the olive oil export markets, there's potential for collaboration in research and development to address common challenges posed by climate change. Collaboration presents a win-win scenario. Greece can share its vast knowledge, helping Australia to refine its production techniques. Joint ventures can open doors to new markets for both countries, and additionally, by working together, they can push the boundaries of innovation, leading to more sustainable practices and even higher quality olive oil for everyone. However, since I'm posted here in Australia, having the mandate to promote the Greek exports to Australia, I will go on in these presentations focusing only on the exports and the bright future of the Greek exports of olive oil here in Australia. In fact, our exploration of the Greek olive oil trade with Australia paints an optimistic picture full of possibilities. Our optimism is based on various reasons. First of all, the demand of high-quality olive oil in Australia is expected to grow since the Australian consumers have developed a sophisticated taste for high-quality olive oil. Secondly, the distinct taste profiles of Greek olive oils can add variety and depth to Australian cuisine, creating exciting fusions. Furthermore, there are already well-established trade relations between the two countries, which could provide a solid foundation. It should be noted that the Greek exporters of olive oil and olives do not pay any tariffs or GST in Australia. The great distance and the transport costs are the only non-tariff trade barriers that the exporters have to overcome. So no tariffs, no GST. Additionally, the rise of e-commerce platforms opens doors for wider availability of boutique Greek olive oils to Australian consumers. And eventually, both countries place emphasis on sustainable practices, creating a shared value of environmentally conscious consumers. To sum up, Greek olive oil is more than just a culinary staple. It's a cultural heritage passed down through generations, cultures, and civilizations. From its unique flavor profile to its health benefits, Greek olive oil offers a taste of the Mediterranean and an evidence to the dedication of quality of the country. As the global demand for premium olive oil rises, Greece is certain to remain a leading producer and exporter, sharing the liquid gold with this liquid gold with the world. The long history of olive oil trade reminds us that even the most ancient trades continue to nourish us in a lot of different ways. So we consider the Greek festival as a valuable ally in familiarizing this significant, the people here in the significant export markets with the quality of extra virgin olive oil. Working together with Nia and Chrysa gives us a great chance to promote the awareness of the Greek quality in this prosperous market. I would like to thank warmly all of you for that you got the time today to attend this function. I would like also to thank particularly the Consul General of Greece and the dream team of the consulate, who are almost all of them here, for their support. Thank you for this opportunity. Enjoy the olive oil tasting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chrysa Prokopaki. I must admit with a hint of guilt that I think I bought Spanish olive oil last time I went to the shop. So from now on, it's Greek, nothing else. I'm going to contribute. I'm sure you're all going to contribute to that 6.5 million euros. So thank you very much. That concludes the presentations for the evening. But of course, it doesn't conclude the evening as a whole. We've got this wonderful tasting array here for you. We'd like to thank all the partners, the Greek Festival, for their support, and welcome you to the front of the room. And we look forward to talking informally. And that concludes the evening. Thank you very much.